Before Patsy shares her presentation, I would like to share with you all just kind of some of the very high-level goals of our outreach program specific to EMWD's potable reuse. Our outreach goal is to develop a robust, creative, and comprehensive outreach and education program that engages EMWD's customers to understand and foster support for our Groundwater Reliability Plus, of which purified water replenishment is one of the subcomponents. Our outreach objectives are to provide clear and transparent information, use a variety of outreach methods to engage, outreach and engagement methods from electronic to actually being out in the community, giving presentations, to increase awareness of and foster support for Groundwater Reliability Plus among all audiences, from our direct customers to our influential public and everything in between, and then see the program through the community's eyes, which, as you all know, as professionals in the industry, sometimes it's difficult to make the transition to see things through the customer's eyes and the community's eyes. The key messages of our outreach are the newest project that's part of our Groundwater Reliability Plus is the purified water replenishment, which is the potable reuse component, which will use high-quality recycled water to replenish our groundwater basins. The second is recycled water, as you all know, has a long history of use in EMWD service area, and potable reuse is the next step in that process. And then the third is EMWD always provides safe, high-quality water that meets or surpasses all state and federal drinking water standards, and purified water replenishment will be no different and will provide a safe, environmentally responsible, and cost-effective drinking water source. So that's kind of the very high-level message points of EMWD's specific program. And now Sarah's going to provide the information about why it takes a village to do this outreach. Thank you.
So you just saw those three messages, which for those that weren't involved in crafting those messages, I can assure you that every word was labored over. It's there for a specific reason, and it's intended to try to advance or communicate what we believe to be important program components to help get this across the finish line. And so for those of you, which is everyone in this room, believe it or not, you all have a role. You are all part of the extended outreach team in some sort of capacity. We certainly wouldn't ask you to memorize those, but to become familiar with them. So at the end of the day, we call it the elevator speech. When somebody says, you know, tell me about why you're putting sewage water in our groundwater basins, you can easily pivot to the three messages to say, oh, you must be talking about our, and then you go straight in to talk about all of these fabulous, wonderful things about this program and why it's good for the region and why you're excited about it, and that we are really proud to be advancing this as part of our water supply strategy. So there are probably about three key drivers that I hope I can get across in the next 30 minutes or so. That, first of all, everyone in here has a role to play. You may not be giving interviews with the media. You may not be standing up in front of the Rotary clubs and being the featured speaker for a luncheon presentation, but in some form or fashion, as ambassadors and management and senior supervisors and individuals that play an important role in this agency, you are all part of the outreach team. The second component is that what we have found over the past 20 years in doing this is that raising the awareness and the comfort level, no matter what you call it, no matter what fancy name that we have designed to describe this, at the end of the day, there are people that have sort of an ephemeral reaction to the fact that what leaves their toilet is what you're now telling them is okay to drink, and that you're excited about it, and that you're proud of it. So it is a marathon, and it's not a sprint. Unlike other programs, I think, which just come naturally, like conserving. Conserving is the right thing to do. It's a behavior change. Water is too expensive to use only once. It comes from far away. It's precious. It's the environmentally right thing to do. If you live closer to the coast, you should desalinate. Look, we've got the biggest water supply in the world right here. Why don't we just take it from the ocean? But what we're talking about now, at least for drought-stricken areas, and in a lot of places across the U.S. is we're taking the wastewater, and technology is very capable of ensuring that this water meets and exceeds the standards so we can drink it. So it's the human reaction that we have been wrestling and tackling quite this time. In this presentation, I'm going to use examples from the Pure Water San Diego program. It's a program that Patsy and I, since we've been doing this a long time, have had the pleasure of doing twice, because the first time in the 90s, it was not successful. So if you do this long enough, you get to do all these programs twice. And I was telling Paul, too, that it's interesting that I started off my career working with individuals, and now, in most cases, I'm working with their children who are on these programs, too. So that's very humbling. And then I also want to state that it's not a one-size-fits-all. You need to know your community. You need to know your constituency. Every project is unique. Every audience is unique. But sort of the 80-20 rule in a different way applies here. Probably 80% of what we have learned in different kinds of programs that deal with wastewater, turning it into drinking water, has strong application here. And we have the fortunate opportunity to work with your team as part of the extended communications team and the project team with Joe, wherever Joe's sitting, Joe, to help you all get this across the finish line. So, getting to public acceptance. So, again, these are the lessons that we have learned, and we believe they do have a large measure of application here. That, first of all, putting this program in the context of everything else you are doing is important. People might say, why can't we just conserve more as opposed to having to drink toilet water? Why can't we just import more water? We had a lot of rain this year. Let's just do that now. We don't have to drink wastewater. Again, if you live closer to the ocean, why can't we just have a big desal plant? Because that's really cool. And even though it uses the same technology, and we fondly say that fish don't wear diapers, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out in the ocean as well. The fact is that people do have a reaction to this. So, framing this as a water resource initiative that fits into the context of all the other things that you're doing is very important. It's a puzzle, and all these pieces are part of that big picture. And that this program, in and of itself, not only improves the quality of the groundwater, which obviously is a very important component of your water resource strategy, it also helps with the quantity as well. So it's really, two for the price of one. It's helping both the quality and the quantity of this. So that's an easy point for people to understand, to get across. And then finally, all of your initiatives require some level of communication. They're all unique, they're all important, they all have messages. But we have found with potable reuse that it's a bit more complex, it's a bit more emotional, it's a bit more expressive from individuals, and so it's a bit more complex from a standpoint of communications. So, communicating about potable reuse. Let's be real. Honestly, it's the most important ask. We're asking people to trust us. Trust us that the technology is there to take what leaves your bathroom, what leaves your dishwasher, what leaves your home, and magically turn it into something that you can drink. Trust us. Yes, there's a lot of humans involved in this process, and there's all these multiple barriers, and things can go wrong, and they do go wrong, but we're going to make it work right. And all of this, and we're going to ask them in some way, either directly or indirectly, to pay more money to do it. So it is kind of the ultimate ask. We've had people say over the years, so this water's already been used once, so is it half the price? Do we get it for a lot less because it's dirty water, it's used water? No, that's not the case. In fact, you should be happy to have this dirty water, and it's going to cost you, in fact, more. So it is the ultimate ask, number one. Number two, we have found that language is really important. We've worked for the Water Reuse Foundation and the Research Foundation, and we've done statewide research, both qualitative and quantitative, sat in rooms with customers and asked them what they think about this. And little things like the word treatment. In most cases, treatment implies something's wrong. You're taking your dog to the vet and they need a treatment. You're going in for chemotherapy treatment. Treatment is like a serious word. And so we have found that people respond better to, we're going to clean the water. we're going to clean the water. Oh, I get that. It's going to be nice and clean. So it's subtle, but in certain conversations, it seems to make people more comfortable. So we learned that through research, and your program will be conducting some extensive research just to make sure that that still has appropriate application here. And then talking tech. I completely appreciate and applaud that many of you that are engineers have really, really fancy terminology, and we live in a world of jargon. And if you sit in a room and you're a real person that walks in, it's like you're from another planet. We don't even know what you're talking about. And so the recipient of that in a conversation, in a presentation, can actually feel insulted. They can feel like, oh, this guy, this gal, this individual thinks they really know a lot. They're going to impress us with their intellect and their degree and the terminology that they use. And the goal with any presentation, but especially with potable reuse, is to try to make that connection, because this may be the only 20 minutes that somebody in your whole service area ever hears about this project. Even though you're all going to work very hard, your comms team is going to be on overtime driving this point home, it's a big jurisdiction, people get information in different ways, different languages, and there's a point of diminishing returns as it relates to budgets. And so my goal, the individual's goal, your goal when you're in this situation is to make that connection. I may not understand potable reuse. I actually may think it's yucky. I really don't want to think about it. It's kind of like a hot dog, sausage. I don't want to know what goes into it, but I like hot dogs. So the goal then is to develop that trust. So that's really important. And we've also found too that to help policymakers, and in some cases even the media, feel more comfortable about potable reuse, is having third-party advocates, building your coalition. If they don't feel comfortable in hearing from those of you who are paid to sell this, maybe they'll feel comfortable in talking to an environmentalist. Maybe they'll feel comfortable in talking to the public health department at your local county agency. Maybe they will feel comfortable in hearing from somebody from the water committee at the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe a professor at UC Riverside. Some combination thereof. And so in our programs, many cases, we go out and we do confidential individual stakeholder interviews. We take 1 hour of somebody's time. It might be the director of the health department at a university to say, this is what this agency is considering doing. And here are some of the questions that have been raised, and we'd like to get your opinion on it. And at the end of the day, our goal is to have that individual be an extended part of our team. We want that individual, when they get a call from the media as an expert third-party independent source, to say, yeah, I'm familiar with what they're looking at doing, and I have confidence in the technology, and I took a tour, or I'm getting information on it, and check their website. So we endeavor to, by default, have a big extended communications team, and we call them ambassadors for our program. And then also too, again, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and so always looking at ways to find, to communicate, and to connect with individuals that can help us, beyond this room, advance our program. I think I skipped one. Nope. Okay, here we go. This is difficult. Okay, so communicating about potable reuse. The internal team is really, really important. That's why we're starting here, and your comms team is going to go out to the departments themselves and drill down and have some of these discussions. We want to ask and practice some of the most difficult projects, so you won't have that deer in the headlights look when somebody asks you the question, such as, why would you want me to drink toilet water? Because our board wants us to? I mean, you want to be comfortable. You want to be comfortable in being able to answer that question. You don't want to hear a question for the first time. So we're going to want to practice those questions internally. You saw the message platform, those 3 messages. Again, that really tells the whole story about what we're doing. Everything on a complex program can fit into one of those 3 messages. We want to create very easy, usable materials. I can tell you from starting 20 years ago when we talked about the multi-barrier system and the size of cryptosporidion and what it takes to get through and the amount of pressure and everything, honestly, most people just want to understand that it's safe, that it's being done elsewhere, the technology exists to do it, who can I call if I have questions, I don't want to be the guinea pig. We have a news bureau that we always recommend how this gets covered. Some of you may have seen, we broke the glass ceiling, we call it the beer ceiling, in San Diego in the month of March, where we had the first commercial brewer in the United States take potable reuse water and make commercial beer. And it was Pure Stone San Diego, and it was Stone Brewery. And we had great media coverage locally. We are now up to over 100 touch points across the United States where that has gotten picked up. And I'm happy to say in most cases it was portrayed in a balanced manner. We do have, we had some female anchor women in Ohio go, oh God, I think I'm just gonna stick to wine. I mean, they just, and so, you sort of go back one step and you go forward again more. It's just, again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the last point here is that multicultural, we have found, is really, really important. All jurisdictions are different, but in statewide research and then our hands-on experience both at the Santa Clara Valley Water District in San Diego and different areas in Los Angeles, people from their culture and their heritage think about water and water use differently. We've done a lot of work in Texas, and we have found that individuals in Texas with a Latino background feel that water is a gift from God. It's very precious. There's nothing we should do to ever compromise that water. On the Edwards Aquifer, when we first looked at putting in recycled water into the Edwards Aquifer, you would have thought that life was coming to an end. It was a big pushback. And we had to go out and get the ecumenical community. We had to get the priests to help us from their dais explain that this was really important for our region and for our community. We have found both in California that many Latinos that come from countries where wastewater contaminates their water, and that's seen as bad, and they've come to the United States, and now this water is so much better because they may connect that with bad stuff. We have found in many cases African American communities have a much higher mistrust of government. So government's coming to say, this is good for you, it's safe, you can trust me. Well, you can't get the homeless issue right. I have potholes in my streets. My kids go to a lousy school. How can I trust you to take wastewater and turn it into drinking water? So again, every community is a bit different, but we do believe that the multicultural aspect of it is important. So some of you may know the story about Miller Brewing Company. It was 20 plus years ago that the terminology toilet to tap was introduced. Patsy and I have been insulted. Some people thought that that was the brand that was created for potable reuse some 25 years ago, and it's going to be in our epitaphs to let people know that we didn't come up with that term. The Upper San Gabriel Valley Water District was looking at taking their secondary treated effluent and doing that magic thing and putting it in spreading basins, having it go into the groundwater basins, Mother Nature working its magic, pulling it out, and 20 years ago doing in some way similar to what's being proposed now. Well, Miller Brewing Company pulled their water out of that basin, and they were quite convinced that that would be used against them from a marketing perspective, that Miller Brewing Company uses number 1 and number 2 water to make their beer. And so they advanced a behind-the-scenes covert opposition campaign and hired a doctor by the name of Dr. Forrest Tennant. They had full-page ads in their major daily newspapers. They paid people. They came in by buses, and they had placards that said, "The tidy bowl man belongs in your toilet, not in your tap. No toilet to tap." And that caught on. Jay Leno talked about it. David Letterman talked about it. And that, along with a variety of other factors, was very impactful in the success of both the project Los Angeles at the time was advancing and both San Diego was advancing. But there's sort of a subtlety there. Toilet to tap is the water tap, but it's also the beer tap. So a lot of people don't quite know that background. And so the fact that we are breaking the beer ceiling is pretty exciting to us. So toilet to tap. It's had a long, rich history. This was from 2008. Recycling sewage is safe and efficient, so why aren't we doing it? It's the dog handing it to the guy to drink. This right here, I couldn't find the original. This is a picture of a cartoon from the San Diego Union, and the gentleman's leaning over and he's talking to his dog who's drinking out of the toilet. And the newspaper headline, it says, "Drinking water from sewage," and the man's saying, "Move over." This was from 1996. So here we are, and as you'll see in a couple of slides, Cartoonists just can't avoid this. This is just too easy of a target. So this was the cup that we gave our independent advisory panel back in 1996. So here we are, 21 years later. Okay, so then we go to this one. So what's the big deal? I've been drinking this for years. City plans recycling toilet water for drinking. Again, it's just way too much fun to have. And here we have May 12th, just a couple weeks ago. City of San Diego hits a major milestone, reaffirms $3 billion. This is the way to go. We're excited about it. The cartoonist, he's crawling on the ground, water, water. Toilet to tap, he dodges it and just keeps going. So again, it's still, toilet to tap is still alive and well. So instead of feeling defensive about it, as we have for the last 2 decades, we've decided just to embrace it. It's fun and we can all get a good laugh. And I was told that this actually appeared in the Paris Progress just last week. This cartoon got picked up. Again, it's just too easy not to play off. I was happy to see after that appeared, there was actually 2 real letters to the editor that we didn't generate behind the scenes. And these are like real people. These are real people that wrote, and the point to this one was that, this cartoon adds to the senseless phobia of recycling wastewater. We need to applaud what's being done. So I'm really happy that this person did that. And then there was another one, time to terminate the toilet to tap terminology. This cartoonist needs to grow up and get with the times. So again, we are seeing that there are members of the public that understand this, that support this, that embrace this, and actually will take the time to write a letter to the editor that we didn't call him and ask him to write. Okay, so on a traditional outreach program, these are all things that you need to know. You need to know your audience. Your goal is to build that community trust. You develop a communication plan, just like you do a design plan or an engineering plan. It becomes your working Bible. You want to start the public conversation. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Where has it been done before? Is this safe? How much is it going to cost? You want to raise awareness about the program. You have a solid messaging plan. Remember, there's a test at the end. There's those 3 messages. Everything you need to know is within those 3 messages. You have targeted stakeholders. We're going to prioritize who we go out and talk to. Lots of different interests, lots of different backgrounds. We're going to have trained spokespeople. All of you, by the time you're done, you're going to want to go out and stand up in front of groups and talk about why this makes a lot of sense and you're happy about it. You want to have concise and memorable materials, and we're going to do a broad approach to the outreach tactics. Communicating is a lot more complicated than it was 20 years ago. Between social media, we have stratification of generations. Traditional print is still very important, but you look at 25 and under, and they get 95% of their whole world is on a smart tablet. So, and then there's all the different languages. So it's a much more of a science now than it probably ever was. So what's different about potable reuse? This is a word cloud, and this word cloud was done in a free-form discussion in focus groups both in Northern California and Southern California, and it's been done in the last 18 months, where there was one sentence along the lines of, your local water agency is looking at taking wastewater and turning it into drinking water, which is now called potable reuse. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? The size of the lettering is specific. We didn't do that for effect. This is how often those words were the ones that were mentioned. And the intensity with which somebody mentioned it, like, oh, God, that's dirty. Oh, toilet. So that's why it looks the way it does. So the yuck factor is never going to completely go away. So again, how we talk about this, how we frame it, how we engage individuals, how we answer the questions all becomes extra important. Paul talked about everybody has a role, and so this is a comprehensive team vision. At the Water Reuse Conference, when I was on this panel, there was 3 of us. There was a general manager, there was a program manager from the private sector, and there was myself. And so we were each talking about the different roles we played, but how it was all interlinked. But this is an illustration of showing how the outreach staff blends with the program team staff, blends with ultimately your board of directors, your operations and engineering staff, the general manager. You all come together to be part of this project, each having a very, very important role. There are a lot of stakeholders that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and in potable reuse, some of them become even probably more important than the others. And we can't take any of them for granted. You'll notice that in this case, we have identified some that probably don't jump out as often as others. We talked about faith-based, again, because of the connection to some of our multicultural audiences. Multicultural, we believe from experience, really is an important audience that probably needs some additional attention. And then also the medical community, which I can assure you that's a really tough nut to crack. First of all, people in the medical field are really busy with Obamacare and insurance and consolidation and all those sorts of things. Secondly, they're not going to put a lot of time and energy in learning about this. Third, they often feel they need to do some independent research before they could lend their name to something. Fourth, they say, well, what does the statewide medical association say? Or what does the statewide nurses association? Or what is the World Health Organization? All of which Paul and Patsy and others are working with the national associations trying to get actual endorsements and or feedback from those organizations that we can defer to. Because every community we go into, the public health director at the county or the head of the medical association here might say, well, what does the state of California say? And we're all running around asking the same people the same thing. So again, there's a vast number of stakeholders to address. Successful program management, the overall program itself, really can be boiled down into 4 buckets. There's the financial aspect, there's the technical aspect, the regulatory aspect, and the outreach aspect. And honestly, in a potable reuse project, outreach is as important, and I know that some of the technical or financial people get a little irritated with us, but we say outreach may be more important than these other things, because I can't think of, and I don't know if any of you can think of, Paul, if you can think of, a potable reuse program that's failed because of the technology. In every case where they have been advanced, it's been a domino effect of which opposition of some sort was the catalyst to having the elected officials get cold feet, or the media have way too much fun so they could start attacking it, to the regulators saying, well, I'm not really sure, to the coalition you're trying to build say, well, I can't support that because blah, blah, blah is against it. So, we've been trying for decades to be sitting at the table with all of the other disciplines, and so now we're at the table, but it's just for a different reason. So again, successful program management requires all of these components, and outreach really becomes an equal player. And this was shared both by the general manager and the programmatic team, that any of these issues, whether it's a schedule can be impacted by opposition, your budget can be impacted by opposition, approvals from regulatory interests, or ultimately your board or local regional officials, elected officials that might not even have any jurisdiction over what you do, but if they choose to make this an issue, they will. We had this in the first go-around 20 years ago. We had a Democratic state senator, no names mentioned, that was not supportive of the mayor at that time, and he called for a series of public hearings in San Diego to review this project, and he didn't sit on a committee. He had absolutely no jurisdiction over this project, but all hell broke loose, and it was just one more nail in the coffin of what ultimately made the first go-around of Pure Water not succeed. So to the extent that there are other political agendas, and it wasn't that that senator didn't believe that it could be done or didn't believe in the technology, he wanted to make the mayor look bad because the mayor was running again for re-election against a Democrat. So it was all a different agenda, but it was a very convenient target. So again, my message points, it's a long-term commitment. We have found that potable reuse, and notice I'm calling it potable reuse. I think Patsy and I are on our own little quest in that we find that the whole discussion of indirect versus direct, while important in certain circumstances, for the regular human beings, it kind of complicates things. Because people, in fact, do like the magic of Mother Nature. They don't really know what happens when it goes into the ground, but it's really good that you just kind of put it down there and something magic happens, and then over here we can pull it out, and then you can treat it some more maybe, and then blend it with some other things, and if I don't think about it, okay. But now we're looking at one-offs. We're looking at surface water. And surface water, creates a whole different set of dynamics. What is it going to do? Recreation, can we still go out and fish in that water? What if it splashes on my child? Is it going to be bad? What's going to happen to the fish? Why can't you just put it in the ground where it goes away and that magic stuff happens? And so instead of talking about direct or indirect, in most cases, we refer to it as potable reuse, and people seem to have the ability to hold on to that a bit better. Because these are marathons, because this is a long journey and anything can happen, you can have a new set of board members come in that, for whatever reason, don't like this. You can have some media people that, for whatever reason, wants to attack this agency and makes this the project du jour. You can have opposition for whatever the agenda is, and it may not have anything to do with this project. So we are always looking for ways with our clients, our team, to make this keep the buzz going, make the energy going, make this kind of like the cool hip thing. Get kids involved, get Stone to make beer out of it, have the local home brewers have a contest and have people come taste the beer. It now sort of becomes kind of a cool hip thing to do. So, and in many cases, you got to go back to your boards or elected officials and ask for more money to pay for this. And so we want this to be comfortable for them to continue to support. And we need to think outside of the box. What are ways, again, to sort of profile this in a way that might be a little different than a traditional conservation program or a traditional siting of a facility? So partnerships can build support. I use this just for illustrative purposes only. We recognized, based upon research, that a couple of the weaker areas that we have statewide, again, is multicultural, number one. Number two, we find that our approval ratings for potable reuse are a bit weaker with females between 30 and 40. It's because they have children and they don't want to give their babies this yucky water. They're in the nurturing phase of usually grandparents. They might be helping care for an elderly grandparent or a parent. And so we've heard them in focus groups say, well, I'll use this to wash my car. Or, I'll use this to water my lawn. I might even wash my clothes with it, but I'm not going to cook with it and I'm not going to drink it. I think they automatically think that out of their tap they're going to be able to choose which water they're going to get, but whatever. I mean, it's informative for us to understand that. So we've made extra efforts to try to reach out to some of these different audiences. We crafted a partnership with the University of San Diego. I bet you could do something like this with UC Riverside if you found the right instructor. And we had a senior class of communicators. It was their last class before they were launching off into the real world. And we said, look, we want your energy, we want your thoughts, we want your creativity, we want your free help. On top of that, we also wanted to have fresh content. Trying to talk about this in some sort of non-technical way on social media or have video content is kind of hard to do. And honestly, most public agencies, I guess with the exception of Berkeley, Marin, and San Francisco, are a little bit more conservative. And so if we came forward as consultants, or if your communications team came forward to your board and brought something kind of edgy, it'd be like, I don't know about that. But if you have these really cool seniors in college that are getting ready to launch off in the real world that live on their smartphones that come up with something that's kind of cool and edgy, for whatever reason, it's okay. And all of a sudden, the general manager and the project managers and the elected officials are taking their content and putting it on their social media, and they're taking it to conferences, and they're showing it in every environment that they can. So we've gotten a ton of mileage out of it. So we asked these students, we said each group, there were 4 groups, we've done this twice now, you have to go out and interview 50 people. We want you to talk to real people on the street, and it has to be in your demographic group. So we did a multicultural group, we did 18 to 26, we did mothers, and we broke up the multicultural into different demographics. And so we said you have to come back with a hashtag, you have to come back with, am I going too long?
We should wrap it up now.
Okay. You have to come back with a hashtag, you have to come back with social media. And they came back with just great stuff.
Kim, Courtney, Chloe, Kendall, Kylie.
Chloe, Courtney, Kim.
San Francisco Giants.
The San Francisco Giants.
The Giants.
No.
That's a good question. Where does it come from?
Sky?
Knowing where your water is from might not seem important, but we'll show you why it is. Due to little rain and limited local water supplies, our beautiful city currently imports 85% of its water. Although that has worked in the past, the cost of importing water is rising very quickly, which would lead to increasing water bills. But there's a solution. Pure Water San Diego is a 20-year program that will provide safe and cost-efficient drinking water by safely purifying recycled water using membrane filtration, reverse osmosis, and advanced oxidation. This will provide us with clean and pure water straight from the tap. By the year 2035, Pure Water SD will supply 1/3 of San Diego's water. With Pure Water San Diego, we can avoid the high cost of imported water and save money by drinking straight from the tap. So, San Diego, we ask, will you tap that?
I'd tap that.
I'd tap that.
Oh yeah, I'll tap that.
Yes, I tap that.
I'd tap that.
Yeah, I tap that.
I tap that.
Our elected officials loved it, the general manager loved it, and they show this at conferences nationally. Paul, I'm sure you've seen it. It's a great video clip. We'll try to get it afterwards. So remember, this is a marathon. Pardon? Okay, yeah, it's really good. So even after a 6-year program that we've had at San Diego, we are always looking for ways. In Santa Clara, we're always looking for ways to do things differently, to talk about this, to make this cool, engaging, and get this across the finish line. Our boards really, most of boards are very interested in metrics. We started off with long dissertations that we talked to 10 groups, and here's what they had to say. They didn't want to hear that. So now we do these really fun infographics of which they all love. So we got to remember our audiences and how best to communicate. The point here is that every one of you are involved in this in some manner. This picture shows the mayor, shows the general manager, it shows an operator, it shows a lab technician, it shows one of the folks that goes out and does school engagement. So in some form or fashion, everybody's playing a role in talking about potable reuse. And they all really like it. They are really proud to be involved. So the key takeaways that we have found that we are sharing with your comms team and your management team, and we hope will connect with you in some manner, is that one size doesn't fit all. We're working really hard to figure out what will work best in your jurisdiction. That research is more than helpful. How you say these things, what you say, who says them is all really important. Words do matter. You clean this, maybe you don't treat it, maybe you clean it. It makes people feel better. We want everyone to feel comfortable with this, so there will be some message training, and for those that may be on media, some media training, so when you get asked those kind of uncomfortable questions, and sometimes they're general questions. Why are you even doing this? It's the way it's asked, and you feel a little bit defensive, like, well, we need more water. You know, so we want you to feel comfortable in how to address those sorts of things. We want you to remember to frame this in the context of the big portfolio of all the good work that's being done to assure reliable, environmentally sustainable, drought-proof water resources, and that staff at every level can and should be an ambassador. And I can offline with you and share stories where well-meaning individuals that have worked for many of our clients have said really inappropriate things about this, and didn't help the cause, didn't help what we were trying to accomplish, and kind of pushed us back on advancing this, where they kind of gave their own opinion when somebody might say, well, you know, would you really drink this water if you didn't have to? And, well, I don't know if I didn't have to, maybe, you know, if I had a choice, probably not. But so we, again, want to make sure that everyone at every level is comfortable with what we're trying to accomplish.